The funny thing I found out about artists out here is when you ask them if you're an artist, most of them say, well, I kind of paint a little bit, or they don't want to admit they're an artist.
This is the Desert Lady Diaries podcast, 30-minute conversations with women who have found their home in the Mojave Desert. I'm Dawn Davis, and this is episode 160. Find out more about the podcast at desertladydiaries.com or engage with guests, listeners, and me on Facebook and Instagram at Desert Lady Diaries. Laurel Seidel was born in North Hollywood and moved to the Mojave in 1982. Her love of art inspired her to open the Glass Outhouse Gallery in 29 Palms on the edge of Wonder Valley in 2009. Since opening the gallery, there have been more than 1,000 exhibits of work from artists in and out of the Morongo Basin. The gallery recently expanded, and a GoFundMe has been set up for donations to bring the remaining work to completion. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So tell me, what was your first experience with any kind of desert?
My first experience with the desert was in 1966. My grandfather had been ill in Sacramento, and my uncle took me to Carson City and dropped me off, and my girlfriend and I hitchhiked to Las Vegas across the desert.
Oh my gosh.
It was quite an experience. The first guy that picked us up couldn't pass a bar, and he got quite drunk, and we offered to drive for him, and he wouldn't let us, so I demanded that he stop and let us out. So he did. He let us out right in the middle of the desert on a really long road that you couldn't see the end in either direction. And my girlfriend was quite upset because I put us out in the middle of the desert, and then a couple guys came along and picked us up, and we were driving along, and they offered us a beer, and I was in the front seat, my girlfriend in the back seat, and the guy put his turn signal on to go down this dirt road, and I said, whoa, wait a minute. What? Well, we're going down here. I said, we're not going down there. And he said, well, I guess you will if I say so. And I said, you stop this car, I'm going to smack you right upside the head with this can of beer.
Oh, no.
So he stopped and put us out. And then my girlfriend was upset again because there we were out in the middle of the desert again, even further out of the desert. And then a couple of really nice guys picked us up and took us into Vegas, where we caught another ride, and we eventually ended up back in Kansas.
Kansas?
Yeah.
What were you doing there?
Well, I lived back there on and off for about 10 years. My daughter was born back there.
Wow.
Yeah. It's, I like the people back there. And it's central of the United States. And back in the 60s, I had a girlfriend. Her and I used to go hitchhiking all over the country. It was safer back then.
Sure.
There weren't as many nuts around. There's 3 more generations of nuts now than there were back then.
Right.
But we would just put a map on the floor and throw a coin on it. Wherever it landed, we'd go.
That's amazing.
And so I saw the whole country except for Maine and Vermont. I missed them.
Wow.
And then the husband that I have now, we did a bucket trip about 5 years ago, I guess it was, around the U.S. and to see things that I had missed, on the tour, like Maine and Vermont,
right,
and Niagara Falls and Mount Rushmore. And he hadn't seen the Grand Canyon, so we went there and
wonderful.
We took a helicopter ride at the Grand Canyon, and they put 3 guys in the front seat with the pilot, my husband and I in the back, and they flew out to the canyon, and just as they got to the edge of it, the helicopter tipped up on its nose.
Oops.
So when you broke the edge of the canyon, you were looking right straight down 1 mile,
Oh my gosh.
And these 3 guys in the front seat screamed like little girls, and I was just cracking up. My husband and I were just... We got back, and the pilot's helping me off of the helicopter, and he says, I thought you'd be the one screaming, but he said, I could hear you and your husband back there just laughing really hard. And I said, they sounded like a bunch of little girls,
Oh my gosh.
But it was a wonderful trip. We took all state roads, stopped in small towns at art galleries.
Nice.
We filled up his Jeep Cherokee that he had at the time, clear to the roof, with artwork that I brought home. And then we bought a chicken that's over there. It's about 6 feet tall. And we strapped it to the roof of the car because we didn't have any room inside. Every time people would see us at a restaurant or a gas station, they'd ask us what's with the chicken. And they had a commercial at that time about this chicken that was free range, and he just ranged too far. And I said, I bought him in upstate New York, and we brought him back here.
He's really free ranging.
Yeah, because he came from Mexico to start with, So he's over there in the yard, but it was quite a trip,
Wow.
And we had a really good time.
That's so great.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So after all your hitchhiking trips, at what point did you come to be in the Morongo Basin here in 29?
Well, my second husband and I had a garment factory in Seattle, and we had a fire, and so we closed everything down, and we moved down to Capitola, which is near Santa Cruz. And from there we moved over to San Jose, and he went to work for Levi Strauss. He's a sewing machine mechanic. And I went to work for Levi's as a utility girl, because I could run every machine in their factory, and they'd never had anybody before that could do that. And I was training a few girls to do that, so when the line slowed up, they could jump from place to place and keep it moving. And I worked for them for, I don't know, I guess it was about 4 or 5 years. And then after my husband and I got divorced, I remarried about 2 years later, I guess, and my third husband and I came down here to visit my parents from San Jose, and my parents had this place. It was just a one-room cabin. It's one of the original homestead cabins.
Here at the outhouse
right,
property?
Right.
Okay.
And so we decided that we were going to get married the next year, and we would buy a piece of property down here and build on it. And he was a machinist, and at that time I was working for a company that made lasers.
Wow.
Yeah, a Jane of all trade master.
No kidding.
Yeah. And anyway, we bought 10 acres over off of Amboy Road to build on, and we came down the next year to get married, and my parents had this place up for sale. They had bought another place down at the other end of the airport with a little 2-bedroom house on it. And so we bought this as a wedding present to ourselves and decided we had a cabin to start with, so we would just start building onto it. And we decided that 5 years after we got married, we'd move down here and retire. And we did. 5 years after we got married, we moved down and started building the house. And we were in the middle of building the house when my husband, came home one day and told me he traded a shotgun for 2 goats. And the next thing I know, I'm milking goats, and that first goat knew I didn't know what I was doing. I wouldn't have been any funnier if I'd had on big shoes and a big red nose. But after I finally got the hang of it and everything, and this place turned into a farm.
Wow.
And the buildings that the galleries are in now were rabbit barns.
Oh, really?
We raised rabbits commercially here. And the building that is the kitchen between the 2 galleries used to be the feed shed for all the livestock. We had goats and chickens and rabbits and geese and ducks and a pig and 19 cats and 2 dogs.
Oh my goodness.
Noah's Ark floating by.
It's like an animal sanctuary.
Yeah. But a few things happened over the years. We had a disease go through the rabbit sheds and one thing and another, and then we had an earthquake, and the rabbits panicked, and it was finally, I told my husband we needed to do something to make a living that we didn't have to feed if it wasn't producing. So we got rid of the livestock, and he was doing gunsmithing for the Sheriff's Department and the CHP here locally, and some of the Marines. He had a federal firearms license. Then after he was gone, I went to work first out on the base as a cook, and then from there I went to a nursing home as a cook, and then I started driving a school bus out here. And I drove a school bus for 5 years out here. I was driving the bus during the week and tending bar on the weekends. because I used to be a bartender too. So, and then I got sick, and I couldn't work anymore. And I'd worked ever since I was 15 years old. I didn't know what it, all of a sudden here I was 55 years old and wasn't eligible for any kind of assistance, and really wouldn't take it if I was. I wasn't raised like that. And so I used to teach arts and crafts at one time, so I started doing that and my painting. And my mother, who had never, ever encouraged me on my artwork, said to me, well, why don't you sell some of your artwork? And I said, like, who's going to buy that, Because I'd always got, it's such a waste of time. I don't know why you do that type growing up,
Right.
And so at that particular time, I was painting saw blades.
Oh, neat.
Yeah. So my cousin, or my niece, took a bunch of them down to Anaheim where she worked and sold them and came back and asked me for some more. And then I thought, well, maybe people will buy my work. So I started painting everything I could get my hands on, from saw blades to feathers to rocks to spoons to fan blades to phonograph records. I mean, you name it, I would paint on it because I really couldn't afford the canvas.
Yeah.
And
so you were repurposing before repurposing was cool.
Right. And then I joined the 29 Palms Gallery, and they would let me pay dues and be a member, but they weren't interested in showing any of my work. At that particular time, is all they were interested in showing was desert scenery and tourist stuff, And I don't paint desert scenery. There's some great desert artists out here. I mean, they can capture this air when it's pink. And I thought I wouldn't even try to compete with them, And so I thought, well, I got these buildings. I have to pay taxes on them whether I'm using them or not. So I rented this mobile that I have to a cowboy that I knew for $200 a month. And I took the $200 and hired a guy and said, I'll give you $100 for labor and $100 for material. I want you to build me an art gallery. I said, when you run out of the money this month, we'll start again next month. And when you run out, it took 18 months to do the very first room in the gallery.
Wow.
At $200 a crack,
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was determined. I thought, well, if they won't show my work, there's a lot of people out here that don't paint desert stuff. So I thought, well, I'll try and give them a place to show their work too. And the guy that did the remodel for me, Robin Gowdy, he was an artist, or is an artist, and so he'd had a gallery in Joshua Tree at one time. So I told him, I said, well, why don't you have the first show? And he said, no, it's your gallery. And I said, yeah, but I don't know anybody. Okay. So you invite all these people that you know. And everybody that came in, I would say, are you an artist? And the funny thing I found out about artists out here is when you ask them if you're an artist, most of them say, well, I kind of paint a little bit. Or they don't want to admit they're an artist.
Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I don't know.
No?
No confidence, I guess.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
But I'd say, well, would you like to have a show? Really? And I'd say, sure. Well, how much? And I said, it doesn't cost you anything. I said, I have 3 requirements. You do the advertising for your show, you furnish the food for the reception, and you set the gallery on the weekends. But now I only have 2 requirements. That they do their own advertising and they furnish the food for the reception. Because I found out through the years that most of the artists that sit here on the weekends, so I can have a couple days off,
right?
People will come and they'll just look up at them and say hello, or if they talk about the art, they only talk about their work, not anybody else's work.
Gotcha.
So I thought it's a case of if you want it done right, do it yourself. So I set the gallery on the weekends now, and because I like to talk to people.
Sure. Well, and people love to hear, the stories behind work. Even at I have a little shop in downtown Joshua Tree, and I have some local artwork in the shop, and I think that makes people feel a little closer to the art that they're buying,
Yeah.
or they learn a little bit more about the area because you're telling them about a particular artist. So I think that's important. That people love to hear, where the artist is from and what inspires them to paint what they paint, or what even the medium and materials. They love hearing that. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, I expanded the gallery into 3 rooms. And my studio was in there, but then my hands started shaking and I couldn't hold a paintbrush to paint. So I turned my studio into another room in the gallery. So the first 2 rooms in the gallery change every month, and the one in the back is multiple artists, 1 or 2 pieces per artist, and it changes every 3 months.
Oh, okay.
That way it gives a lot of artists a chance to show a few pieces of their work.
Sure, totally.
And I've had artists from here to Chicago show here.
Wow.
And I have an artist from Kentucky that shows some of his work here in the back. And I got so booked up, booked solid through 2024.
Holy cow.
And that was last year,
Right.
And that's when I started the renovation on the new building.
Yeah.
Because the last artist that showed waited 5 years to get in here.
Wow.
And I thought, I've got to get more space. And the other building was empty, so I decided to renovate it. And right after I started, this pandemic thing hit. And I had a little problem with a guy that was going to do the cement work in the gallery, and I said he could stay in my guest house while he was doing it. But the minute he moved into the guest house, he stopped working.
Oh, dear.
And then he moved his girlfriend in and 19 dogs in. Yeah. The guest house was a 1-bedroom travel trailer. It was really nice, one of the newer ones, you know. Anyway, I didn't know about the 19 dogs until he was arrested.
Oh, geez Louise.
Well, when he stopped working and I had all this cement and I only had a limited amount of time to either take it back or use it. And so when I told him that the job was over, he got really mad and started threatening me and one thing and another, and burning up my pressure system. Every time I'd get a load of water, he'd run it out on the ground back there. 6 loads of water in 1 month. Run my utility bills up to $450 in 1 month.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so he wiped me out. The repair work for the pressure system and everything else. And then he got me to court on a false deal. My husband and I went up there. He was fighting the eviction, supposedly, but the paperwork looked kind of funny to me. Anyway, we went up to the courthouse, and when we came home, the trailer was gone.
Oh my goodness.
I can't say he took it because I wasn't here.
You weren't here, right.
And that's what I told the sheriff. I can't say for sure.
Yeah.
But the sheriff said if I reported it stolen and they looked for it and found it, I would have to pay the towing fee, the impound fee, and license fee for every year it had not been on the road before. And after 19 dogs being in it, I told the sheriff, I have to destroy it anyway, so I'm just going to report it taken. Okay.
Yeah.
So by the time he got done with me, it cost me a little over $20,000.
Holy smokes.
And
which is money that now you don't have to put into the galleries, which is is this why you're doing the GoFundMe?
That's why I started the GoFundMe and the donations, because for the first 11 years I was open, I never took any donations at all. People would offer them and I'd say no. But because, when he got done with me, I had $236 left in the bank, and
Holy
I thought,
smokes.
So I started taking donations for this, and we got the roof on with the donations and the floor in, and the pandemic just everybody tightened their purse strings. So I don't know, I must be nuts because I thought I have got to finish this. So I went down and took a loan out at the bank.
You're determined.
And then I used my credit card, and it's finished. But it's not paid for.
Right.
Yet.
Right. So you have a big event, though, coming
Yes.
up on September 11th.
And if the ladder's tall enough, I may be able to get my nose up there to see it. I've dug myself quite a hole, but I was determined I was going to get it done, you know. And I think, I'm not sure, but I think when we open it on September 11th, it will be the biggest gallery in the Morongo Basin.
Wow.
With the old one and the new one together.
That's amazing.
You know, because I'll be able to show actually 8 artists.
Right.
I have 5 new spaces in the new gallery, 2 in this one, and the hallway in the new gallery is going to be for artists from 18 and under.
Oh, how
And
wonderful.
My first artist in there is 8 years old, and he's just as cute as a button. He's about, 3.5 feet tall. And every time he's here and I turn around, he's standing there pointing his finger at me saying, I have a question.
Oh.
And his mother told me he's like that at home all the time.
It's a little precocious.
Yes. And I said, well, you know, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And I told him, Chandler, that's the way you learn. There's no such thing as a dumb question.
Right. Just keep asking.
Yeah. So if you don't know the answer, it's not a dumb question.
No.
Just because the other guy knows it doesn't.
Right. So tell me what inspired, because the name of the galleries are the Glass Outhouse. Tell me what inspired the idea behind a glass house, and if for someone who's listening who hasn't been here, kind of give them a visual explanation of what the Glass Outhouse actually is.
Well, the mobile home that I rented to a friend of mine for $200 a month, I had an old boyfriend, and he had got these big panes of glass that he was going to build a greenhouse with. And he took off, and I still had the glass. So my friend that lived in the trailer said, why don't I call the glass people in town to come out and maybe they'd buy the glass. And Robin, the guy that was remodeling the gallery, kept telling me I didn't need a restroom, and I kept saying we did need a restroom, and he wanted to know what I was going to name the place, and I thought, I don't know. And when Slim said something about the glass, and I said, no, I want to keep it, and he said, well, what are you going to do with it? And I said, I'm going to build a glass outhouse. And I thought, where in the world did that come from? I have no idea where that idea came from, other than Robin saying we didn't need a restroom, and I kept saying we did, and him wanting to know what I was going to name the place. So I had Robin look at the glass and ask him if he could build it. And he said, oh, yeah, I could do it. And I said, okay, now I have a name for the gallery. And he said, what's that? And I said, the Glass Outhouse Art Gallery. He said, you're kidding. And I said, no, I think it's kind of catchy, you know. It has, you can see out, but nobody can see in. And it has a flushing toilet in it. And we've just built a second one because of the new building. We'll have more people here. It is the restroom if you need one. They both are in the same way. You can look out, but nobody can look in.
Yeah.
So
I've used it.
It's quite an experience.
It is.
My favorite time.
It's kind of weird. It's like, do I really want to go to the restroom
Well,
here?
I roped it off. We put the quicksand pit in between them.
Yeah.
And we roped it off because people kept doing what I call a Garfield on the window.
Oh, no.
Put their hands on the window and their face up against it to see if they could see in. And it's a little unnerving if you're sitting in there and they're, you know, and people are trying to look in at you and you're thinking, oh my God. But so we roped it off so they couldn't walk around it and do that.
That's great. Yeah. And the new one, I'm looking at it right now, is really beautiful.
Oh, yes, it is.
So you did a nice job on it.
Yeah. The contractor I had did some fantastic work here.
Yeah. So overall, how would you say life has treated you here in the desert?
Well, I think it's treated me pretty good. I thank God every day for him letting me do this, because without him it wouldn't have been possible. It's like the little chapel we have on the property. It's beautiful, and we've had 5 weddings in that chapel. And my husband and I were driving to Yucca one day, and I was just kind of staring off into space, and this idea just shot right through my head like a bolt of lightning. And I turned to my husband and I said, I just had an idea. And he said, what's that? And I said, we need to build a chapel. And he said, I can do that. So we came home, and 2 hours later he showed me the sketch, and he built it, and I asked my minister what we had to do to make it an official chapel. And he said we had to bury the Word of God under all four corners, and we had to have it blessed. So we buried a Bible under all four corners of the chapel, and we had a minister come out and bless the chapel.
And it's so sweet.
Oh,
it's really sweet.
It is.
About how many people would you say can sit in there?
Well, there's 4 pews, and if you're real friendly, I think 8 people.
Yeah.
We had a couple show up here on a Thursday afternoon, and they wanted to know if they could get married in the chapel, and I said, yes, all you need is a minister and a witness, and if you don't have a witness, I'll show up. And they said, well, what does it cost? And I said, well, it doesn't cost anything. They said, well, how about tomorrow afternoon at 5 o'clock? And I said, fine. They showed up with about 8 people and got married the next day.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
This is a not-for-profit gallery, not non-profit, not-for-profit.
Yeah.
People need to know that there's no fees here for the artists and no commission on their sales. It's here purely for art.
Yeah.
And I know it's upset a few people locally because I don't know why. And I don't care. But,
well, you're giving some artists an opportunity that they wouldn't normally have somewhere else.
Right. Well, most galleries won't even talk to you if you've never been in a gallery.
Right.
And most galleries want between 35 and 50% commission on your sales. And for a first-time artist, well, even a long-time artist, it's a lot. They do a lot of work, and it's their ideas and everything, and most of the galleries only will accept you if they think they're going to make a lot of money off it. And I don't see the work before it comes in. I don't even know what the artists do. I just tell them I don't show pornography and I don't show political. And other than that, you stand or fall on your own merit. I'm just giving you an opportunity that I never got. And I told Chandler, my little 8-year-old artist that's going to show, what an opportunity this is for him. Because as he grows and his art progresses, when he goes to get in a gallery, he can say he had his first showing in a 5-star gallery.
Wow.
I found out a couple of years ago I have a 5-star rating on this gallery.
Oh, probably on Google or Yelp from people just kind of passing by and coming in. And
we were at Borrego Springs having lunch, and we were sharing a table with some strangers because the place was really crowded. And I was talking to a lady about the gallery, and the guy across the table wanted to know about it and what the name of it was, and he looked it up on his phone, and he said, oh, wow. And I said, wow, what? He said, you have a 5-star rating. I said, really? He said, you didn't know? And I said, I don't have a cell phone or a computer. I don't have time for that.
No.
I just found out the other day we were featured in the Smithsonian Magazine as one of the 8 most unusual places to stop and see in the United States.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I have copies of it in the other
That's
room
amazing.
of the article.
That's great. Well, besides the work that you're showing from other artists, if somebody hasn't been here, there's also a whole outdoor scene.
Yeah, there's
with
about
all
4
kinds of
acres.
stuff. Tell me about the funniest thing I find here is the skeletons on the exercise equipment.
Oh, Ghoul's Gym. Instead of Gold's Gym, it's Ghoul's
Gym.
My great-nephew went off to college, and he left his gym equipment with his mom, and she said, I don't know what to do with it. And I said, well, I'll take it. And we put it out there, and I thought, and it was near Halloween, and I saw the skeletons, and I thought, oh, that's perfect, I'll just put them aside. That's what happens if you exercise too much.
Right.
You can get too thin. It's like my horse.
It's a cautionary tale.
Yes. It's like my horse that you can't see, the people on the radio can't see. It's a skeleton horse over here. I did have a little mechanical horse over there, and it would move its head and bat its eyes and wiggle its ears. It was motion censored.
Oh, gotcha.
And the sand got in it, and
oh, shoot.
It kind of died. So I thought I still have the corral, so they had a skeleton horse, so I put it in the Somebody said, I thought you had a different horse over there. I said, it died.
Yeah. Well, Laurel, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to sit with me today and tell me your desert story, but also for all of the giving you do to the artists here in the Basin and beyond. It's really a special place, and I think it'll just live on in infamy
I hope so.
in the desert. Before I let you go, I want to do our segment called Diary Unlocked. So if you will take 2 chips out of that jar for me. And if you're listening and you're not familiar with Diary Unlocked, this is where we ask our guest 4 random questions. And the answers to those questions are available on Patreon. So if you would like to support the podcast via Patreon and hear all of the answers to the questions that I'm going to ask Laurel and all of the previous guests' answers to those questions, go out to desertladydiaries.com, click on the support page, and sign up to become a patron of the podcast. So the questions I'll be asking Laurel are, is this the life you thought you'd have when you were a teenager? Name the last 2 desert creatures you saw and where did you see them? Who is one person that made a big impact on your life and in what way? And what do you think about when you're alone in your car? So if you want to hear Laurel's answers to those questions, again, go to desertladydiaries.com, click on the support page, and sign up to be a patron of the podcast. Laurel, thanks again for making the time. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, and thank you for coming.
Totally.
And again, if you'd like to support the Glass Outhouse Gallery, you can look for the GoFundMe titled Keep the Arts Alive at the Glass Outhouse, and the website is gofundme.com. If you're interested in seeing more photos of the gallery and the grounds, you can go out on Yelp, Google, or even TravelAdvisor, and there are a ton of reviews and comments and photos of the gallery. I have a shout out this week to Fairy J. Thanks so much for following on YouTube. I appreciate you. And if you enjoyed this episode, I hope you'll subscribe and share it with a friend. Thanks so much for listening.